The law office of Harrison and Associates felt too small for the amount of tension filling it. I sat in the corner, watching my stepmother Victoria adjust her Cartier watch for the 5th time in 10 minutes. At 35, she'd been married to my father for barely 3 years, exactly 2 years and 8 months longer than his battle with aggressive pancreatic cancer. I'm Sophia Bennett, 28, and today was supposed to be the reading of my father's will. But Victoria had spent the last 20 minutes explaining to Mr. Harrison why we shouldn't waste time with formalities. Mike and I discussed everything, she said, pulling out a document from her designer handbag. This will, dated 2 months ago, leaves everything to me. As his wife, it's only natural. I felt sick. Dad had built Bennett Construction from nothing, turning it into one of the city's most successful development companies. The thought of Victoria controlling his life's work made my stomach turn. Let's proceed properly, Mr. Harrison insisted, adjusting his glasses. We should wait for. The door opened and Uncle Jack walked in. He wasn't really my uncle, but Dad's best friend of 40 years might as well have been family. Victoria's perfectly painted lips tightened at his arrival. Jack, she said coldly, this is a family matter. Uncle Jack ignored her, taking the seat next to me. His weathered hand found mine under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze. He'd been there through everything, teaching me to ride a bike, attending my graduation, and supporting Dad through Mom's death 10 years ago. As I was saying, Victoria continued, sliding the will across the table. This makes everything clear. The house, the company, all assets transfer to me. She turned to me with fake sympathy. Sophia, I know this might be difficult, but your father wanted me to secure his legacy. Legacy. The word felt wrong coming from her mouth. This woman who'd appeared in Dad's life after a charity gala, who'd rushed him into marriage while he was still grieving Mom, who'd systematically worked to distance him from everyone else. Mr. Harrison began reviewing the document, but something felt off. This will appears properly executed, but... Then we're done here, Victoria interrupted, standing up. Sophia, I'll need you to clear out your office at Bennett Construction by Friday. The company needs fresh direction. I worked as a project manager at Dad's company, having started from the bottom 5 years ago. The thought of leaving the company I'd grown up watching my father build made my chest tight. That's not what Mike told me last month. Uncle Jack's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Victoria's head snapped toward him. Excuse me. Uncle Jack reached into his worn leather jacket, pulling out an envelope. Mike asked me to hold on to this, said to bring it to the will reading if anything seemed wrong. Mr. Harrison took the envelope, examining its seal. This is from my office, he confirmed, opening it carefully. Victoria's composed facade cracked slightly. Whatever that is, it's irrelevant. I have the legal will right there. This, Mr. Harrison said, scanning the document, is a detailed account of conversations between Michael Bennett and myself, dated throughout the last year. He looked up at Victoria, including one from 3 months ago expressing concerns about coercion regarding his will. The color drained from Victoria's face. That's ridiculous. Mike signed the will voluntarily. Did he? Uncle Jack leaned forward. Because Mike told me something interesting during our last lunch together. Something about you bringing documents for him to sign while he was on heavy pain medication. I remembered those final weeks. Victoria had barely left Dad's side, controlling who visited and when. Even I had to schedule times to see my own father. You have no proof, Victoria snapped, but her voice wavered. Actually, Mr. Harrison said, pulling out another file, we do. This is Michael Bennett's actual last will, recorded on video 6 months ago, before his condition deteriorated. He turned his laptop around, and suddenly Dad's face filled the screen. He looked tired but clear-eyed, sitting in this very office. If this will is being played, Dad's voice filled the room, it means exactly what I feared has happened. Victoria, he paused, I know what you're trying to do. I've known for a while. The mistakes in my company's books that Jack found, the mysterious changes to my accounts, the convenient witnesses for a new will. Victoria's face went from pale to ashen. So this is my true last will and testament, Dad continued. To my daughter Sophia, I leave controlling interest in Bennett Construction. You've earned it, sweetheart, not just as my daughter, but as someone who understands what our company means to our employees and their families. Tears filled my eyes as Dad detailed the rest of his wishes, including provisions for Victoria that were generous but far from the complete control she'd wanted. And Jack, Dad added, "Thank you for always watching out for my girl. Both when I asked you to, and when I was too blind to see I needed to." The video ended, leaving the room in silence. Victoria's hands were shaking as she gripped her bag. "Mr. Harrison," she said tightly, "surely a video doesn't override a legally signed document." "No," he agreed, "but evidence of coercion does. And the documentation Jack provided, along with the financial discrepancies we've uncovered." He let the implications hang in the air. Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. But as she reached for the door, Uncle Jack's voice stopped her. "You might want to delay any travel plans," he said calmly. "The police would like to ask you some questions about those company accounts." As Victoria's perfectly curated world began to crumble, I felt Dad's presence in the room, and for the first time since his death, I smiled. This was only the beginning. The week following the will reading was chaos. Victoria's carefully constructed facade crumbled as the investigation into Bennett Construction's finances deepened. Uncle Jack, it turned out, had been quietly gathering evidence for months. "Your father noticed money disappearing from company accounts," he explained as we sat in my office, surrounded by financial records. "At first he thought it was accounting errors. Then he found transfers to offshore accounts he'd never authorized. The forensic accountants discovered Victoria had embezzled nearly $2 million over the past year. She'd taken advantage of Dad's illness, using his deteriorating health to gain access to company accounts and forge his signatures. She planned this from the beginning," I said, staring at the documentation. "The rushed marriage, isolating him from family, then the convenient new will. Mike figured it out near the end." Uncle Jack nodded. "That's when he contacted Harrison and made the video will. He wanted to protect you and the company." The police investigation revealed more than just financial fraud. Victoria had a history of targeting wealthy, vulnerable men. She changed her name 3 times, leaving a trail of suspicious deaths and contested wills across 2 states. "Ms. Bennett?" My assistant Sarah poked her head in. "The employees are gathered in the main conference room." I took a deep breath. As the new CEO of Bennett Construction, I needed to address the staff about recent events. Walking into the conference room, I saw familiar faces, people who'd watched me grow up, who'd worked alongside my father for decades. "I know there have been rumors." I began looking at their concerned faces. "Yes, Victoria Thompson, Mrs. Bennett, has been arrested. Yes, there was financial misconduct. But Bennett Construction is stable and secure." Relief washed over the room. These people weren't just employees. They were extended family. "My father built this company on trust, integrity, and treating everyone like family," I continued. "That's not changing. In fact, the first thing I'm doing is reinstating the profit-sharing program Victoria convinced Dad to suspend." The announcement was met with applause. Dad had always believed in sharing the company's success with those who helped build it. Later that afternoon, Detective Morrison visited my office with updates. "Mrs. Bennett is cooperating," she said, using Victoria's married name for the last time. "She's hoping for a plea deal." "Will she get one?" I asked. Given the evidence of premeditated fraud and the pattern of similar behavior in other states? Unlikely. The DA is pushing for maximum sentences. As Detective Morrison left, Uncle Jack arrived with another surprise. "Found this in Victoria's personal storage unit," he said, placing a familiar wooden box on my desk. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were Mom's journals, the ones Victoria claimed had been accidentally thrown away during her reorganization of the house. She kept them all this time. She kept anything she thought might have sentimental or financial value, Jack explained. "Insurance, I guess, in case things went wrong." Reading Mom's journals that night, I found entries about Dad, about me, about her hopes for the company's future. One passage stood out. "Mike and I built this company thinking of Sophia's future, not just to give her something to inherit, but to teach her the value of creating something that helps others succeed too." The next morning, I called an emergency board meeting. Victoria's choices had hurt more than just the company's finances. They damaged trust and morale. "We're implementing new oversight procedures," I announced to the board. "Complete transparency in all financial transactions. And we're establishing an employee emergency fund to help our workers through personal crises." "Your father would be proud," Mr. Harrison said after the meeting. "He always said you had his head for business and your mother's heart for people." The company's legal team was working overtime to recover the stolen funds. Most of Victoria's offshore accounts had been frozen, and assets she purchased with company money were being liquidated. But the biggest challenge wasn't financial, it was rebuilding trust. Some clients had gotten nervous after Victoria's arrest made headlines. I spent days meeting with them, assuring them that Bennett Construction's foundations were solid. Uncle Jack was my rock through it all. He knew every client, every project, every challenge the company had faced. His guidance helped me navigate the transition from project manager to CEO. Your dad and I used to talk about this, he told me one evening as we reviewed contracts. He knew you'd end up running things someday. That's why Victoria scared him so much. She threatened everything he built for you. Looking around Dad's old office, my office now, I saw photos of construction sites, completed buildings, and happy families moving into homes we'd built. This was Dad's real legacy, not just successful business, but positive impact on countless lives. Victoria had tried to steal more than money. She tried to steal a legacy built on decades of trust and hard work. But she'd failed because Dad had trusted the right people to protect what mattered most. As I signed the last document authorizing the new employee benefits package, I felt at peace. The company wasn't just surviving, it was emerging stronger. Dad had prepared for the storm, and now it was my turn to steer the ship. 1 year after the will reading, I stood at the podium during Bennett Construction's 30th anniversary celebration. The grand ballroom was filled with employees, clients, and families who'd been part of our company's journey. 30 years ago, I began. My father started this company with 2 employees and a borrowed truck. Today, we're breaking ground on our largest project yet, the Bennett Community Complex. The screens behind me showed renderings of the development, affordable housing, a community center, and a medical facility, all built using sustainable materials and innovative design. But more importantly, I continued, we're announcing the Bennett Foundation, dedicated to providing construction training and apprenticeships to at-risk youth. In the front row, Uncle Jack beamed with pride. After Victoria's conviction, 15 years for fraud, embezzlement, and other charges, he'd helped me reshape the company's future. The foundation was his idea, inspired by how Dad had given him a chance 40 years ago when he was just a troubled kid looking for direction. The audience applauded as I introduced our first class of apprentices, 20 young people who would learn the trade while earning a living wage. Among them was Tommy, Victoria's victim from her previous marriage scam in Boston. When we discovered him during the investigation, he was living in a shelter. Now, he was learning carpentry and attending night classes. After the ceremony, during the reception, Mr. Harrison approached with news. Victoria's appeal was denied, he said quietly, and the last of the recovered funds have been released from escrow. I nodded, feeling a weight lift. The money wasn't just about finances, it represented closure. We'd recovered most of what she'd stolen, but more importantly, we'd recovered our sense of security. Dad would have loved this, I told Uncle Jack as we watched the apprentices mingle with veteran employees, especially the training program. He didn't just teach construction, Jack agreed. He taught people to build their own futures. Now you're doing the same. The company had thrived under the new transparency policies. Our ethical business practices attracted more clients who shared our values, and employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. The profit-sharing program had been expanded, and our workers' children were receiving college scholarships. Later that evening, I visited Dad's grave, placing fresh flowers beside the headstone. Mom's journals sat in my bag. I'd taken to reading them during important moments, finding guidance in her words. You were right, Mom, I said softly, opening to a marked page. Building something isn't just about bricks and mortar. It's about building people up too. The sound of footsteps made me turn. It was Sarah, my assistant, holding a folder. Sorry to interrupt, she said, but you'll want to see this. Inside was a letter from one of Victoria's former associates, confessing to helping her target wealthy businessmen. The police would use this evidence to reopen several cold cases, bringing closure to other families she'd hurt. It's really over, I realized, reading the letter. The next morning, during the company's monthly breakfast meeting, I shared stories about Dad that many hadn't heard. How he'd helped employees through tough times, paid medical bills for workers' families, and quietly supported local charities. That's the real Bennett legacy, I told them. Not the buildings we construct, but the lives we help build. We'd implemented new traditions too. Every project now included a community benefit component. When we built office buildings, we added public spaces. Our residential developments included gardens and playgrounds. We weren't just constructing buildings, we were building communities. Uncle Jack had semi-retired but still came in 3 days a week to mentor the apprentices. His office wall displayed photos of Dad and him from their early days, reminding everyone of our company's humble beginnings. Your father once told me, he said as we watched the sunset from the office roof, that his biggest fear was that all his work would end up in the wrong hands. That someone would turn it into just another soulless corporation. I thought about Victoria, who'd seen only dollar signs where we saw opportunities to help others. She'd never understood that the company's real value wasn't in its assets but in its impact. The next project on our schedule was renovating the community center where Dad had first taught me about construction. Standing in the empty building, I could almost hear his voice explaining how every beam and joint worked together to create something stronger than its parts. That's what we'd done with the company, taken all the pieces Victoria had tried to scatter and built something even stronger. The Bennett legacy wasn't just surviving, it was evolving. You know what Dad would say about all this? Uncle Jack asked as we reviewed plans for the apprenticeship dormitory. I smiled, remembering Dad's favorite phrase. We're not just building structures, we're building futures. And as I signed the documents authorizing our next community project, I knew we were doing exactly that, building futures, one brick at a time, stronger and better than ever. The legacy Victoria tried to steal had instead grown into something she could never have understood. A foundation built on trust, integrity, and the simple belief that doing good business means doing good for others. That was the real inheritance Dad had left me, not just a company, but a mission, and I was making sure it would last for generations to come.